In this presentation, you're going to get a step-by-step guide on implementing ISO 27001. Those are my contact details, so any questions you've got, just flick us an email or give me a call, or you're more than welcome to link in with me on LinkedIn. Information security is a critical issue for you as a business, but as you can see there, government reveals 1.35 billion investment in cybersecurity over the next decade. That's the Australian government, because they've been under attack over the last month. I don't know if you realise, from an outside country. They're not naming who it is, but cybersecurity is big at the moment. The ACT government had a big audit recently, and it was a shocker. So they've been told to improve their data security. So there's that cyber attack underway. So that was last week. The Prime Minister announced that they were under attack. And then our ex-Prime Minister just recently, a couple of days ago, explained that New Zealand is also very vulnerable to cyber attacks. Over this COVID period, the WHO says there's been a 5-fold increase in cyber attacks, mainly because of this remote working we've been doing, which is through remote work, through VPNs and the like. There's some security issues involved with that. So we're all under attack. You can't stop the attacks. It's just a matter of defending ourselves and preventing loss of our data. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Just a quick overview of what 27001. Some of you might already know this, but just to give you a quick overview, basically 27001 is two things. So there's the 27001 itself, which is the management system, and it has this thing like an annex. So the annex is sort of the second part of the standard. It's an annex, but it's also called, strangely, I'm not sure why, someone will tell me, it's called ISO 27002. Inside of the management system, we'll go through this in detail later, is the standard ISO Annex SL arrangement, but then all of the objectives and the controls and the section 8.0, which is the operations, all of that sort of stuff is in the Annex A. So it's a fantastic standard because it tells you how to set up your management system, but it also tells you how to actually put in controls for all parts of your organization to protect your information from attack. So it's a two-sided standard with you setting up your management system, but then it also tells you how to actually protect yourself with various methods. So just be aware that it's a double standard. It's not really a double standard, it's a twin standard where it's got two sides to it, and it's a fantastic, I think it's the best ISO standard written because it basically tells you what you have to do. Okay, so let's start with the ISO 27001 standard, the what it actually looks like. So those are the main clauses, the context, the leadership, planning, support, operations, performance, and improvement, and then there's the annex. So what does that all look like? It follows the plan, do, check, act, Deming cycle that you're all probably aware of. So the first four, the context, the leadership, the planning, and the support part, the bulk of your work you're going to do when you're doing the implementation all sits in this planning phase. So there's a whole bunch of work you've got to do up front and get planned and get it all in place, because next you've then got to do it. So the operations stuff all sits inside the do, which is the Annex A. So that's ISO 27002 sits inside of there. So that's doing what you say that you're going to operate as. Then you're going to check and see how well you're performing. Are you actually defending yourself well or not, or are there some vulnerabilities that you're not protecting yourself from? So you do the check, and then of course finally is the act. So that's the improvement side of it. So any things you find out of your performance evaluation, you would maybe raise those as improvements or follow the improvement process to make improvements to your system, and then that cycles around and you go back through your system. So it's continually updating, reviewing your system. So just to let you know, so Mango here, we got ISO 27001 maybe 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago. And so we've been through this cycle, and we cycle through this, and we have a risk and audit committee that reviews our performance every month, and we review how well we're defending ourselves from outside attacks. and we're actually getting audited this month by DQS, and it's a fully remote audit. So they're auditing us from Australia, from Melbourne and Sydney. We've got remote auditors dialing in and remote auditing us through the web, and so that's happening in a couple of weeks' time. Let's just get into the 27002 stuff. This is the most sort of important stuff. So inside of the Annex A, the first part, A5, the information security policies, there's a couple of controls there you've got to put in place. The A5 is how your policies are written and reviewed. Then A6, the organisation of your information. This is where you assign responsibilities for various tasks. A7, the human resource security. This is some 6 controls here, ensuring that your employees understand their responsibilities prior to employment and once they've left or changed their roles. Then A8, you've then got to identify all your information assets and then define the appropriate protection responsibilities. That's in A8. A9, access control. There's 14 controls in here. So this is quite a big one, ensuring that employees can only view the information that's relevant to their role. So you don't want information being shared that they're not allowed to have access to. Cryptography, this is around encryption and decryption and management of keys and other sensitive information, so very technical information sitting in that one. Physical and environmental security, this is one that sort of gets overlooked a little bit because this is around securing your premises and your equipment. So yes, they can get in through email and whatnot, but they can also get through into your systems by breaking into your premises and property. So make sure you got good controls around that. Operations, this is where they're looking at ensuring that your information processing facilities are well under control. So you know, our data is held in various servers, but mostly in Microsoft Azure in Australia, so we've got to have good protection around that. Then communication security, there's 7 controls there. This is how you protect information in your networks. 14, A14, this is around or ensuring that information security is a central part of your information systems. So when you're building your information systems, that information security is a central part of that. So the next one, supplier relationships. This is making sure you've got agreements in place with contracts with all your third parties, and make sure that those agreements are all being monitored. Incident management, this is how do you report any disruptions and breaches, and then who's responsible for notifying whoever for those things. Business continuity, obviously this has been big over the COVID period, but very important clause around that, how to address any business disruptions. And then finally, compliance, making sure that you identify all the rules, the laws and the regulations that apply to your organization. So those are all the controls that you need for ISO 27001. Once again, I say that it's a crucial to get these things right, and basically the standard tells you what you have to do. So that's all the background of the standards and what they all mean. Let's get into the implementation. So I've got a 5-step process, the process that we followed here at Vango and worked really well. We'll step through these one by one and I'll give you a bit more detail about them. So define your strategy for information security. This is our strategy. This is what Mango, we sat down right at the start and said, why do we want to get ISO 27001? What's the purpose for the business? Customers had been asking us about our information security for many years, and we've always had a privacy policy, we've always had a security policy in place, and that's displayed on our website. And we've basically been telling customers, hey, just trust us. But we felt that we actually needed a bit more than just trust. We wanted to give them some more level of quality assurance, or assurance that we know what we're doing. So we said, right, we're going to define the strat. So our step one was we're going to get 27001, and the first thing was, what do we want to do? First of all, we're going to preserve the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of customers' data. We're going to assure customers that Mango is well managed in a professional organization. We want to give confidence to the customer's IT department, because The IT departments of our customers are the ones that are always asking us questions about our security, so we wanted to give them confidence. We wanted to use best practice as well. So for all the controls that we have to do, we wanted to use best practice. Plus, we wanted to be compliant with other standards, including GDP out of Europe, POPI out of South Africa, Privacy X and the like out of Australia and New Zealand. So we wanted to, those were our 5 top strategies that we wanted to achieve as part of implementation. So that's step 1. Step 2, so your next thing you need to do is obviously you've bought the standard, grab the standard and go through the Annex A and put Annex A into maybe a spreadsheet, or if you're using Mango, use the compliance module. ISO 27001 is clause 6.1.3. Produce a statement of applicability that contains the necessary controls and justifications for inclusions, whether they are implemented or not, and the justification for exclusions of controls from Annex A. So you basically take all the clauses of Annex A, and there's 108 of them, put them all in a big spreadsheet, or use the compliance module in Mango, and you say which one are you going to include and which one are you going to exclude in your system. So of the 108 clauses, you need to justify why you include them, and you need to justify why you exclude them. So for example, there's one exclusion that we've excluded for Mango because one of the clauses talks about a docking bay or something like something that happens at inwards goods. So at Mango here, we don't have a docking bay or inwards goods. We don't have that at all. So we've excluded that. But everything else, the 107 other clauses of Annex A, we've said, yes, we will do all of those, and here's our justification. Your first step is your strategy. Second step is you create a statement of applicability. Which parts of 27002 or Annex A, which of those will apply to your business? So you do that right at the start. And that's a document that you give the auditors when they turn up if you want to get certification. That's quite a job. That will take a while because you're going to go through clause by clause, talk with a bunch of people, get a whole lot of other people involved, and discuss, are you going to do these things or are you not? And if you're not going to do some of these clauses, then you need to have a really good justification. Step 3, this is the majority of your work here. You're going to spend days, weeks and months on this step here. So this is where you, basically the standard is a risk management standard. And what you're going to do is you're going to work out, well, what's going to be the scope and the context and the risk criteria for you to decide which things, and we're going to talk about each of these things, we're about to go into them in detail, which of these things apply to our business and how are we going to control these things. So you can work out your scope, your context, and the risk criteria. We'll show you what we used at Mango. Get a whole bunch of staff involved and participating in this. So you may want to set up some committees or set up some teams to put all this together. You're then going to conduct a risk assessment. You're going to go through a process of risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. And then you're going to determine your risk treatments, which includes all the controls. And then you're going to have put in a process of monitoring and continuous review. And the last step there is make sure that any future risks or opportunities are easy to record. So this is the process you're going to go through for each of the risks that you've got for your business. And we'll just go through those in a bit of detail now. So you have to write down, you have to list all of your information assets. So you've got hundreds of these, you've got a lot of these, let's say that. And they come in various forms. So you've got digital ones, so that's data stored electronically. So that's, you need to list all the software you use, you need to list servers that you have, and everything you capture, whether it's in software or in on networks or on servers, or we've taken it down to monitors, we've taken it down to everything around anything electronic. We've listed it all. So we've listed all of the software that we use across the organization. We list all the data that we capture and where it's captured and how long we capture it for. Those information assets, you need to list all of those. You also need to list all the material stuff that you have as well. So that's not electronic. That's could be paper-based, or your whiteboards, or desks, things like that. You need to capture what information that, or things could be held in filing cabinets or in safes and things like that. So you've also got to capture all of that. Plus, you've got this other weird one, which is the knowledge, which is the know-how of your employees and contractors. So this is information you've got in employees' heads that may not be written down. It may not be held electronically. It may not be held paper-based. So you've got that as well. You've got to put some controls around some of that as well. So that's a big job. You've got to list that, and I'll show you how we did that here at Mango. In the capturing of that information, you also need to think about for each of that, these 6 things. And I'll go through some examples, but you've got to look at where are you vulnerable, what threats, who's the threat agent, who's trying to get that information from you, what is the risk, what's the likelihood or the severity of losing that information. Are you exposed to that? Is the system open or exposed to losing that information? And then what treatment or controls are you going to have on top of that? So let's have a look at that in a bit with a couple of examples. So for example, you're vulnerable to entry to your building. So the threat someone could enter through your windows, and the agent is a thief, and the exposure is maybe loss of they could walk out with your computers or your laptops or your hard drives or servers, whatever it is, loss of the computer. And the exposure is you leave a window open. So there's the opportunity for them to get out there. But what treatment or controls do you have in place to that? Well, we lock the windows. So that you've got to have this sort of thinking for each of your information assets. So what's the vulnerability of the information? What's the threat? How could they get in? Who's doing it? What's the risk? What information could you use? How are you exposed? And then the treatment. Well, here's another example. Say, for example, malware. The threat could come through an email. The agent could be an overseas gang, or someone's trying to send you some spam email. The risk is, they could potentially shut down your information systems. The exposure, so how do you get attacked? Well, someone inside of your organization suddenly clicks on a link that they shouldn't be clicking on, and then a bit of malware is then put into your network somewhere and you don't even know it. So what's the treatment or the controls? Well, you could filter out spam, or if it's getting through, then you could train your staff to not click on silly links. So that's the thinking that you have to do for each of your information assets. So let's just talk cyber at the moment. I'm not talking about physical things like whiteboards or paper-based systems, but let's talk about the common cyber threats. This comes from CERT-NZ, which is a government organisation here in New Zealand. If you go to that website, there's a great website that gives you advice on how to defend yourself against certain threats. So they've listed down these threats here as the main cyber threats that you're going to be attacked by. Business email compromises. So this is where an attacker gets access to your email account without your permission, and they carry out a range of attacks or scams. You need to sort of make sure that your business email is secure. So that's the business email compromised. Phishing is an interesting one. This is probably the most common and most prolific and successful attacks in New Zealand is through phishing. So this is where they send you something and maybe someone in your organization clicks on a link and then suddenly they've got some of that person's details. The next one is spear phishing and whaling. So this is where spear phishing is where they may send you an email and it looks like it's come from another person in your organization or from a department in your organization, and it looks like it's come from them, but in fact they've been spoofed and it's actually coming from outside of your organization. So that's a very focused type of phishing attack. And whaling is where they attack the big people in, this, maybe the CEO or the CTO or the people at the top of the big fish. The big fish is what whaling is. So this is a very targeted attack at some of the people right at the top of the organization and compromise maybe their email. Credential dumps, this is where they may have attacked some of the big, LinkedIn or some of the big organizations and hoovered up a whole lot of usernames and passwords, and then they've dumped that out into the internet, and people have then grabbed that and grabbed your username and password, and suddenly they're using that as a threat back at you. So this is a common one. I get that quite a bit because my details on LinkedIn were hoovered up at some stage years ago. So my username and my password way back then gets threatened back at me via a credential dump. So that comes through my spam every so often. Another one is an insider threat. This is another big one. This is where this is a malicious threat or from someone who has inside knowledge to your business. So it could be a previous employee or it could be a contractor. And so this is probably one of the biggest ones you're going to find is an insider. So maybe someone inside your organization is attacking you, or someone who knows your systems very well is attacking you as well. So there's that. There's denial of service. You've probably heard of these ones. This is where outside networks or outside computers start sending requests through to your server or through to whatever, something on your network, and it stops other people accessing your network. So it's typically targets servers to make websites and maybe payment services unavailable, preventing legitimate users from accessing online information. And then ransomware, this is a malicious software that denies you from accessing your own networks and puts sort of encryption around your files. So, if you haven't got good backups, or they may even encrypt your backups, this is where they sort of stop you from accessing your own systems, and then they ask for a ransom, and they will only give you back access to your network if you pay a ransom. So you may have heard recently with Toll Group in Australia has been attacked a couple of months ago with ransomware, and then they cleaned up their systems, but they didn't really clean out the systems because the attackers left a little bit of code that left another gateway for somebody else to get in, and somebody else got in through the back of Toll as well, and then shut their systems down and had another ransomware attack. So quite another common one. And then the last one is a data breach. So this is where maybe some private or confidential information is released into an unsecured area. So maybe an employee or someone finds a particular hole in your systems. You may remember a few years ago in New Zealand, there was ACC had a hole in their system where some of the kiosks, some of their offices, people could get into their network through that kiosk without people being aware of it, and could download some of the data and then release that data out to the media or whoever. So those are the types of common cyber threats that you've got to be aware of, and all of those there are listed on our system, and we've got controls in place to prevent each one of those. So you should do the same. So we're still in the risk management area. So this is how Mango did all of that. So first of all, we created an asset register, a very long register of all of our information assets, including all of our servers, all of our equipment, everything, all of our computers, laptops, phones, iPads, tablets, the lot, all listed on our asset register. And each of those assets has an output. We then classified all of that information through a thing we call our classification register, and then those of the highest, so we classified them into priority of private, confidential, in-house, and public. So we classified and the highest important stuff was around private down to the public, which was less important. And from that, we then create our information security risk register. So I'll show you what that looks like soon. So the first part there is our risk assessment, and then the risk treatments are all done in the last part there. So the risk assessment, so this took months put together. So it's not an overnight thing, or you're going to do it in a week. This took us a few months, maybe 4 or 5 months of actually just putting all of this together and sitting down, reviewing it, getting it right, reviewing it again, checking vulnerabilities, threats, and then putting that into our information security risk register. So the classification register I talked briefly before about. So this is the classification. So we classified the information we've got into those 4 buckets. So we've got secret information, so that's extremely sensitive and is the highest value to the organization. So this is passwords, all of the stuff that is secret to us, our financial records, accessing servers in Microsoft Azure, stuff like that is very, very extremely sensitive and its highest value. So access to a very, very small number of people and authorized people. Then the next level is the confidential stuff. So this is sensitive to us, but its access is limited to a few more people that needs it for a legitimate business need. Internal, it's non-sensitive and used for our day-to-day operations so that we can operate, but it's limited a bit more. And then public, that's non-sensitive, public available, so that could be mostly stuff that sits on our website, as well as sending out emails to people as well. So access to obviously to our website doesn't need to be limited to anyone. So those are the classifications, and I suggest you do the same for all of your information assets. And just you might be surprised. It surprised us about once we classified this stuff, who actually has access to it and who doesn't. So I suggest you do the same. And this is what our information security register. These are the column headings that we have, and we use the risk module in Mango to do this. So the item, we talk about the vulnerability. What are we vulnerable to? What sort of harm can that cause us? And then what's the risk to us if that information escapes? And then so we've got a sort of high, medium, low category there. We put in our controls and our actions to get those risk down to an acceptable level. Well, we call it our residual risk level. So that's the level of risk that we're willing to hold on that particular bit of information. We accept that. We then have mitigations to make sure that risk that we've got left over, what mitigations now do we have in place? We've got our controls in place, but what other mitigations do we have in place to keep that down? And then if it goes wrong, what happens when it goes wrong? What are the contingency steps? What do we put in place if those things if it gets breached? What do we actually do? Have we got backups? Can we recover that information easily? What do we do? Can we still keep operating? So that's the information security risk register. So this is the single most important document and lists everything in our organization around information security and how it's well managed and controlled. Just beware, step 3 takes you a few months, and that's clause 6 of the standard, and spend a lot of time getting your process right for that, and then going through a step-by-step process of identifying all your information, classifying it, and then putting in the controls and putting that all onto a risk register. Rightio, step 4. So inside of your information security register there, you've got a big section there on the controls, and the controls that we used are all based on ISO 27002 or Annex A of the standard. So as you see, there's 108 controls that are listed in there that cover this particular part of the standard. So we've got information security policies in place, A6, all of these areas, asset management, access control, cryptography, all of the controls that are listed there. We've got controls for all of the information that needs to meet those parts of the standard. Sort of step 3 and step 4, you sort of do them together, and you make sure that what you've got written down in step 3, you actually implement in step 4. So where you say that you're going to do whatever, you're going to provide training and provide necessary know-how, or you're going to assign responsibility and do whatever that needs to be done as part of step 4. and you keep records that you've done that stuff, and you show the auditors if you're getting certification to this standard. So that's where you do step 4. You implement all the controls that you've got listed in that information security risk register. Finally, you then implement the rest of your management system. So, you've worked out your statement of applicability, you've done all of your risk management, put in all your controls. Now you can step back, and now you can put in the rest of your information security management system and implement that. So write your manual. Now we suggest, we haven't done this normally in the past with quality systems or environmental management systems or safety systems, but for information security, the standard actually works really well for information security. So we suggest you write your manual around the clauses of the standard because they seem to fit well for information security. If you want, we've got in our website there, you can download a free manual. You can use the step-by-step guide that I've created there in the ebook as well, and that goes through clause by clause for clause 4, clause 5, clause 6, clause 7, 8, 9, and 10. Explains all that. But so write your manual and then implement your manual. So whatever it says in your manual, leadership, make sure your leadership's committed. So get evidence that your leadership's committed, or planning, and that's all the risk management stuff that you've already done. Clause 7 is around support, which is around competency and awareness and training, and make sure that's all in place. Operations, that's all of the Annex A stuff that you've done as part of step 4. And then clause 9 and clause 10, get your internal audits in place, your management reviews in place, and then get your continuous improvement going. So, so implement the manual, get that all operating, then conduct your internal audit, conduct a management review, and then you're ready for certification to 27001. It's as easy as that. But as I say, it took us about a year to put all of this together. From the start, from getting that strategy up front to getting certified to 27001 took us about 12 months. We took our time. We didn't rush. We didn't rush it. We wanted to make sure that everything was all in order. We're not technical experts in terms of information security, so at any point that we were unsure of certain things, we would bring in IT consultants to help us with various, maybe some testing or various things, checks to make sure that we've got spam filters in place and we've got protection against some of these threats. We've just double checked with experts. We checked our we rewrote our business continuity plans. We got experts in to help with making sure our servers were all well protected. We did a whole lot of stuff using technical experts. So a lot of this you can do yourself, but some of the real technical stuff you may need to pull in some experts and get help with it. So that's reasonably straightforward. If you enjoyed that video, why don't you click here where you can view a video about setting up an information security management framework for ISO 27001.